second episode of Accurate Hunts.
Yeah, it's just all of that work. It just takes time for the teams to figure out where the poachers are coming into the area.
But is that something that will ever happen or could ever happen? Is there a big supply of ivory in the background that we don't know about?
And back to what I was saying previously with our northern Maasai Land area, that volcanic soil, that particular, that high elevation, the rainfall and so on there, allows an enormous amount of game to congregate.
All right, well, welcome back to another episode of Accurate Hunts, A Life Outdoors. And today we have someone who is living what I believe would be their best life outdoors, definitely a good version of my life outdoors if I could. But we have Morgan with us, Morgan Potter, coming from Tanzania. Welcome to the show, Morgan.
Thanks very much for having me on. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you for joining us. Now, I know the internet's a little bit different over there and time zones and things have been playing against us, but we finally got some time to sit down together, so I appreciate that. And you're a tough man to tie down at this time of year because it is hunting season.
Yeah, it is. It's a little out of the ordinary that I'm able to do something like this, and we'll sort of do our best with the local internet here. But yeah, I had a bit of a break in my season with the safari getting postponed, so kind of just in town, somewhat unexpectedly. So I thought it'd be a good opportunity to have a chat with you.
I'm sure the family would appreciate you being in town unexpectedly mid-season.
Yes, they are in the US at the moment, but they're happy to hear from me more frequently.
And you probably get some jobs done around the home while you're there.
Yeah, a little bit. Kind of laying the groundwork. They'll come out and visit. I think this year won't be a time that they'll come and visit, but next year they'll come over. So just kind of, getting the groundwork laid for having the whole family over, which will be nice when it happens.
And you've got a couple of kids. How old are they?
I have 4. My oldest is 7. I've got a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 13-month-old.
Yeah, right. That's I've got 2 and one on the way, which no one actually knows about yet, and they will by the time this comes out. But
there you go. Congratulations.
It makes the guiding stuff. Yeah, thank you. Congratulations. Sorry to hear it, one of my friends said. But it makes the guiding stuff difficult. I'm sure you must have a supportive wife.
Yeah, she's a saint. She's definitely a saint. But with that said, it was never really going to be any other way, I suppose. Maybe there was glimmers of hope. But yeah, I was a professional hunter when we met, so.
Yeah, she knew what she was getting into.
Definitely. There's no way she can say she didn't.
You just said it then, and I want to talk about it a little bit more. What are you doing in Tanzania with an Australian accent?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I am a professional hunter. I work for an outfit called Robin Hurt Safaris, which is one of the most, I would say, oldest and most well-known safari outfits in East Africa. Our founder, Robin Hurt, who's now sort of semi-retired, I would say. He still hunts, just not so much in East Africa anymore. Has been a licensed professional hunter for 60 years. So that's just a really, really long time by modern standards for sure. And he founded this outfit. It's now run by his 2 sons, Roger and Derek, who I'm very lucky to call close friends. And I'm one of their guys, which is a real privilege. I always wanted to work for Robin Hurt Safaris. I always aspired to work for them, and now at this stage I've made it. So I'm feel pretty chuffed about that. But yeah, it's been a bit of a journey to get here. But it's the most wonderful job in the world. I truly can't imagine doing anything else. It's not always easy. It wasn't always easy to kind of stay in this industry. It's had its ups and downs for sure. And we could kind of cover some of those, but it's yeah, it's a real privilege to do what I do. Is phenomenal, and I feel kind of lucky to have made it. To be honest with you.
I yeah. I mean, luck is one thing, but you create your own luck, I suppose, and you put yourself in positions that led the way down the path to where you are now. And you say you always wanted to work for them. I'm sure you didn't want to do that when you were 15-year-old or so back here in Australia. It was something that crossed your path when you were over there, and then you made it your challenge to head in that direction.
Yeah, for sure. The seed was kind of planted. My grandfather hunted in Africa, in Kenya in particular, in the 60s and 70s. I think he did 2 safaris. And he had in the house a number of mounts from Africa, and he'd get out when we'd sort of have a quiet evening. He'd get out one of those old slide machines. It's kind of like the rotary type deal where you like drop the slides into this little sort of rotary magazine and then like press a button and it'll sort of rotate through them and project them up on the wall. So he'd get that out and kind of show me all his Africa slides. And I remember, some of them are kind of like just imprinted on my memory. I could like accurately describe to you exactly what the pictures were of. And it sort of, the seed was always planted. I mean, this stuff was probably happening when I was, 10 or 12 years old, so I always kind of had this fascination with Africa. But yeah, for sure, life took me in a lot of different directions. And I got into professional hunting in my early 20s, which I suppose isn't that old. But a lot of these guys that are like born and raised in Africa, they'll start, right out of school when they're 18, or they'll be kind of apprenticing, when they're in their late teens or whatever. And I think, it's nice if you can do it. I sure kind of a part of me really wishes that I'd gone in that direction earlier. But with that being said, the one thing I've noticed, like in the part, well, since I've been in the industry for sure, is the clientele that you get are generally speaking very sophisticated people. And it helps to be someone who's got a little bit of life experience, I think, because safari, I mean, I sort of going to probably just keep banging this drum throughout our conversation, but safari is about a lot more than just being out hunting. It's kind of this all encompassing experience, and the relationship you form with your client over the course of a safari it can be a really wonderful thing. I just got off a safari where, I mean, it couldn't have been better. And so I think, just being someone who's got a little life experience definitely aids with that process.
Yeah, I can understand that. I consider myself a worldly person, and not from a gloating traveling sort of perspective, but just from I've experienced a lot of things, good and bad, and they all shape you in some direction. But it definitely it's noticed by people when I travel and guide and things. I sort of pride myself on being able to hold a conversation about lots of things. I know a little bit about a lot of things.
Yeah.
And, whether you're on safari with a doctor or a builder or a taxidermist or, I don't know, I've had all sorts of things, Texan farmers, and there's always something I can talk to them about, and they appreciate that. And I've seen it just recently. I came off a safari and there was an appy there, and he was an amazing young appy, which is apprentice, which I really like that shortened version, which for some reason Australians haven't shortened the word apprentice yet to appy, but we'll get there.
Let's get it started.
We shorten everything else, but he was lacking the camp skills with the clients, and that was also noticed and commented on by a few people. So I think, yeah, you can't regret taking the path you've taken, because it always ends up where you are now. And
For sure.
having those extra life skills just backs you up to, deal with different clients along the way. And I'm not sure how it's set up over there, but when I was doing some stuff in Canada, it was the owner of the business knew me well enough to put me with appropriate clients. So he knew
For sure.
the clients, and he knew which ones would be suited better to my personality and the things I want it out of a client, I suppose, which sounds funny because the client's there to have the trip, but it's also the guide needs to know how to work the situation, and it wasn't uncommon for me to chuck the dishes towards a guy and say, come on, give us a hand, mate. Let's get in and get this done. And these are I say millionaires or just business people that have got lots of money. They're not often used to doing the dishes, and they really enjoyed it for a change. But that it just comes down to the way you sort of deal with these clients, and I'm sure you've come across good ones, bad ones, some that you can't wait for the safari to end, maybe. But I want to know about this special one that you just come off and why it was so better or so different.
It was a family safari, which I think, in my opinion, if you have the means and you have a family that's interested, it's about the best way you can do it. So it was 21 days of hunting, and they hunted both of our areas. So we have an area in northern Maasai land called Lake Natron, which is just an absolutely beautiful area. It's right in the East African Rift Valley. It is the biodiversity there is unbelievable, and all that's really kind of predicated on the volcanic soils from the rift that creates this incredibly rich in kind of nutrition and water landscape kind of that the amount of animals, the amount of different species that congregate there is incredible. Even when it gets incredibly dry, it still has the ability to kind of hold these large concentrations of game, which is quite fascinating. So we did half the safari there, and then the other half in our western Tanzania area, which is called Luganzo Game Reserve, which is an absolute behemoth of an area. It's over 2 million acres of pure wilderness, and just the most kind of quintessential wild Africa. There's lions there, elephant, all of the big five, excluding rhino, and a whole kind of host of other plains game animals as well, birds and reptiles too. It's just an incredible place. So for them to have the opportunity to experience both of those areas, which are extremely different, northern Maasai land has a lot of people living in it, a lot of Maasai, seasonally grazing, and also kind of sedentary, like living in that region now. And then Luganzo, of course, is just completely is total wilderness, set aside for wildlife only. So yeah, to experience both those areas was incredible. And then as far as the clients themselves, I mean, just wonderful people, very very open to really experiencing all of it, and really kind of diving in with both feet, and kind of feeling the ups and downs, and just really allowing themselves to have a great time. And it was a beautiful thing to experience. Truly, it was one of those safaris where I was extremely sad when it ended. I was really, really sad, genuinely, to drop them off at the airport. So,
Was it an open-minded safari in terms of species, or was there target species for certain people in the family?
yeah, there was. I mean, there was target species, certain things that they were most interested in hunting, I would put it. But I think that they all had such a good attitude in terms of, okay, it's hunting. There's nothing's guaranteed. But these are we'd like to focus on this and this, and if it happens, it happens. But they were certainly, really, I think, open-minded about what was out there and what the possibilities were. But it's always funny, I find that when you have a safari and someone comes and they've got one or two animals that they're absolutely focused on, we all are doing our best to make that happen. But honestly, I've just noticed over time that you tend to be much more successful when your energy is that kind of open-minded, kind of, receptive to possibilities kind of energy. And then you'll find that the things you want will just kind of come naturally.
I think that's the best way to look at a trip to Africa. And I mean, I've been twice, and I
Hmm.
wish I was there more often. But when I sell people into that trip, we have packages and things, but I've explained this to a few recently, and I say that that's just a guideline. Go with an open mind, and if you've got a budget, that's fine. Have your budget there too, but speak to your outfitter about what's available at that time. It's like eating unseasonal fruit. If you've got to fly it in from California, it's not something I want to really eat right now.
Right.
Talking about cherries because the wife just bought a punnet. But if, I was over there in May and it was the kudu rut, and that's prime time to hunt kudu, but the client wasn't particularly chasing a kudu. And then, really good kudu were just appearing everywhere because they were chasing girls around,
Yeah.
and then someone would then go to book again later in the season and want that kudu, but then they're like, well, you sort of missed that prime time. So I always say to people, go with an open mind, speak to your outfitter about what's happening at that time that you want to book, and then trust your trust your outfitter or your guide. And if he says, as mine did to me, if you don't shoot that, I will, then you know it's a good one.
Yeah,
I
for
don't know if
sure.
you've ever said that.
No, typically not. I definitely don't come on that strong, as a general rule. But yeah, there's been things where um, the clients have said to me after, when the kind of, I had the sticks up and was getting them set up, like, and you were really breathing heavy there. You were really excited about that one, and I'm like, oh yeah, I was excited. Wait till we get over there and have a look at it. You'll see why. Um, yeah, there's definitely things that I just, yeah, I have a hard time passing up. And we're a little different in Tanzania in the sense that some of the species availability has to be kind of prearranged. So, on a 21-day safari, we call that a full bag. So there's really nothing on the list of available species that isn't, at the client's disposal. They can hunt anything really, other than the stuff that, of course, that we're not hunting at all for either reasons of just they don't exist in the area. They're not enough of them that we're hunting them at the present time, or for example, the quota has been expended, because we have quota from the government that we sort of have to adhere to, the annual quota, which is, it's a very sensible and reasonable system. Works well for us, works well for them. So, there can be issues with quota. It's rare, I would say, especially on those bigger safaris. But a client on a 10-day safari, I always encourage them to, if possible, you know, upgrade their hunting license to what we call the major permit, which gives you the possibility to shoot some more, of the kind of, I would say, like, advanced is probably the wrong word. I'm struggling to kind of find it, but some of the species like greater kudu, for example, or sable antelope, roan antelope, these type of things, because inevitably, if you come out for 10 days on a buffalo hunt, you're going to see a terrific specimen of something that you don't have on permit. So I always encourage people to upgrade their license if they can, because you never know. You might not feel like you want a sable right now, but when you get over there and you see one, it's going to be, you're going to feel different.
It's going to be something special to
Yeah,
make those guys pull the trigger on it.
yeah, most definitely, most
Y-
definitely.
On the quota topic,
Hmm.
I want to just backtrack a little bit. You mentioned that these are reserves that you're hunting on. You guys
Hmm.
have the outfitting license for that reserve?
Yeah,
It's a
it's
government owned
exclusive.
land?
Yeah. So the way Tanzania works is all the land is owned by the government. Um, there is some, you could call it custodial rights, where people have been on that land for a long time and they can farm it, or graze it, or establish a village there. But for all intents and purposes, it's government land, and our hunting concessions are, a lease, an annual lease, but on a with like a preset term. So at different times, the government will conduct what's essentially an auction, where they auction the rights to these concessions. And each concession comes with a fixed annual fee and then a quota of animals as well, an annual quota. So companies like ours, we bid on different areas. Generally speaking, our policy and our way of looking at it is it's best for us to hold on to our areas for as long as we can. Some people might look at that differently and see it as something where, you shuffle different areas, you have, different possibilities every 10 years, this and that. But for us, we have, a couple of core areas, kind of Luganzo being really the sort of jewel in the crown, if you will, that we have had for a long time and we're very focused on keeping because of the investment we've made in it, and the ongoing investments that we want to make. And when I talk about yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Also, so you can see your management plans and things come to fruition and sort of follow those
Exactly.
through.
Yeah, most definitely. And so, that investment takes a lot of different forms. Obviously, yeah, management plan as far as the game and the species. That's a big deal. We're constantly evaluating um, how the population of various animals is doing, and what we think is a reasonable utilization, reasonable offtake, and what how we want to see that sort of play out, which species we'd like to be seeing doing better, which species we feel are in good shape. So that's a really an ongoing dialogue. The other thing that we invest heavily in is obviously anti-poaching work. So we've got crews now that really know the areas, and we have we have guys that are land-based, so in Land Cruisers and trucks. Then we have guys that are water-based, so we have a number of boats, because this Luganzo has one of its boundaries is a huge lake, and then the other boundary is formed, sort of partial boundary is formed by the Ugala River. So we have sort of like water-based anti-poaching, and then in the rainy season, where it's very difficult to get around at all, we have kind of amphibious operations as well, with a military vehicle that can kind of swim. So yeah, it's just all of that work. It just takes time for the teams to figure out where the poachers are coming into the area, and figure out who's who in the community to kind of work with to combat poaching. And then the other investment piece is community development. So building schools, building clinics, setting up mobile clinics for members of the community that are kind of out in different areas seasonally, like medical, sort of like pharmacies, for want of a better term, where people in the community that do need access to medication can actually get it. Yeah, teacher housing and accommodation is a big one in rural areas. Having somewhere where the teachers that come out to operate the schools can actually live comfortably. We've constructed a lot of that type stuff. Right now in Luganzo, we're looking at building a fish farm together with the community to try and alleviate some of the pressure on the wild stocks of fish. So projects like that really take a long time to bear fruit. And they develop a lot when they work, which ours generally do. They develop a lot of goodwill between our company and the community. So to be able to kind of, get the most out of that, yeah, long-term investment in our areas is key for us.
One thing that, well, a little bit of background, and maybe why some of the listeners recognize your voice or your name, was that you're on the MeatEater podcast recently. And one thing you mentioned on there, which I hadn't particularly thought about, and we'll talk more about that episode in a minute because it's pretty exciting, was when you find some poachers, it's not that hard sometimes to turn them into good employees.
Yeah, it definitely isn't. So a number of our trackers are ex-poachers, and
That's
it's
incredible to think about. Like, I just from an Australian point of view, poachers are obviously hated, and
yeah,
they're doing it for different reasons. I understand that, and I wouldn't mind you know, explaining the reasons why they poach over there, and it's a little bit different to our poaching over here. But I
yeah,
can't imagine me employing a guide that I caught poaching on my property because he knew the property better than I did, because he'd been doing it
yeah,
by, you know, shady means for some time.
yeah. Yeah, it's a very different thing. Poaching in in Africa, in general. I mean, I speak with obviously specific reference to Tanzania. It's a criminal act. Don't get me wrong. And poachers of every sort are essentially, especially given the way that our wildlife conservation model functions in Tanzania, are essentially robbing their countrymen of an opportunity to economically benefit from this system.
Are the
By
locals, do they call it poaching? Do they have another word for it?
Yeah,
Or
yeah. I mean, they have a word for it, and it is poaching. I mean, they recognize it as a legal activity. They don't. I mean, I would say there's not sort of heavy stigma around it because it is something that generates protein. And every rural community in Tanzania is generally in deficit when it comes to protein and wanting more protein. So that's the main driver of poaching, frankly, is people having to make a living. And whether that living comes from, selling the meat itself or consuming it themselves, or a combination of both. That's kind of the main driver of it. And I've encountered a lot of poachers in my time, and there's very few, if any, really, that I can recall. And I refer specifically to meat poachers now. I mean, commercial ivory poaching is a bit of a different story. Thankfully, I haven't had too many interactions with them. The ones I have been fairly unpleasant, I would say. But when I talk about poaching in this context, it's commercial sort of meat poaching, either commercial or for sort of personal use. Guys that are illegally fishing, illegally collecting honey, these type of things. When you look at these individuals, you don't see this sort of malevolent, hardened criminal. You see a guy that's genuinely trying to get ahead in life and doesn't have a ton of options because life in rural Africa is hard. So we've had good success. Our founder, Robin Hurt, was definitely known for it, um, being able to kind of catch these guys and sort of sniff out, get a sense of, how good are you at this game? If you're out there in the game reserve with this old muzzle loader, this kind of homemade sort of percussion muzzle loader type thing, and you've got a big pile of meat back at camp, you might know a thing or two about hunting. Why don't you go straight? Why don't you come and work for us? And
they
of
seem to
course,
pride themselves on it, on their ability
for
to be
sure.
successful.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. There's I'm thinking of one guy in particular, and he is just a phenomenal hunter and tracker. I mean, he really is just brilliant. And I think that he was talented, and Robin Hurt recognized it to his enormous credit. I'm sure glad he did. And now this guy is one of our senior trackers, and he's incredible at what he does. I mean, and it's not just that he has the skills, he has a great attitude. um, and he's your quintessential senior man. He doesn't take any nonsense, but he's very focused, and he's a predator in the truest sense of the word.
It's a I described it to someone, the difference between the sort of two sorts of criminals, right? It's still illegal what they're doing, but
Absolutely.
I would liken it to someone jumping the fence at the local community. I'm giving an Australian reference here, but the local community farm where everyone gets together and grows veggies in town and stealing a few veggies versus a bank robber type situation. they're going to do the wrong thing, but nearly for the right reason to keep their family alive.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I think that's a very, yeah, I think that's a very good observation and a good analogy. There are there are certainly poaching activities that have a harder edge to them. When you talk about the ivory poaching and stuff like that,
Yeah,
it
sure.
definitely has a sort of harder edge. But thankfully, it seems to me, from my observations, at least in the areas that I've been working lately, that we're coming through that period where that's getting a lot better. There's less and less of that happening, so that's a good thing, um, because that has another whole kind of level of criminality to it, right? Where it's
More on the
being
organised crime side of things, the larger
very much
organisation.
so. Yeah, precisely. It's being orchestrated at like an international criminal level. So yeah, there's definitely that's a whole other level of activity. But yeah, for sure, in terms of what we see, sort of fish poaching, um, you know, meat poaching, illegal honey collecting activities, illegal grazing, um, that definitely the people are just trying to live, and so what we're trying to do is create a system where um, they're informed about the benefits of having the game reserve there, um, in terms of what can flow back to their community in terms of employment, obviously the community development projects that I just spoke about, and then also um, you know their their birthright in many ways and their natural history, um, as Tanzanians. So that is something that I think again in areas like Luganzo we've made a lot of headway, which is why our poaching activities that we're seeing are way down.
On the ivory front, I was in Botswana at one point, and I was at a touristy place called Elephant Sands, and the
Hmm.
elephants just turn up at the water and drink. But we did a little bit of drinking that night and ended up going on a midnight tour with the young game manager fella. It
Hmm.
was off the insurance cards, I'm sure, but
Yeah.
he was. I want you to either whether you know or not, but confirm or deny that certain states or countries specifically have container loads full of ivory, and we're planning on flooding the market. And whether it's ivory they've harvested themselves or picked up from
Hmm.
poachers, confiscated. I know we've all seen the footage of them burning ivory, which
Yeah.
I sort of struggle to believe because I know a guy in Australia's house burnt down. The only two things left were the two 90-pound ivories that were next to his fireplace. They didn't burn, so I don't know how they burned that
Yeah.
pile of ivory in the photos. But is that something that will ever happen or could ever happen? Is there a big supply of ivory in the background that we don't know about?
Yeah, there's a vast supply. So countries like Tanzania is one. I'd put I'd make a high bet that Botswana's one too. Zimbabwe's certainly one. I would think South Africa as well. Probably, I'm not too sure about Mozambique, and Zambia, but I could speak with specific reference to Tanzania. Tanzania has an enormous stockpile of ivory. Um, as you say, as you correctly pointed out, a lot of it is from elephants that have died in the national parks or the game reserves. Certainly if we encounter any ivory in our work from an elephant that's died, either a natural or unnatural death, that's handed over to the government immediately. That's government property. Um, yeah, there's a vast stockpile, confiscated from poachers, what have you. And governments um, in Africa have petitioned CITES to allow them to make um, a, a one-off sale, you could call it, or let's say a limited sale, in order to offset some of the demand for illegal ivory. And I understand it very well from the perspective of those governments. And the perspective that they are coming at it from is purely we are sitting on millions, potentially billions of dollars of product here that we're not allowed to sell because CITES, this UN body, this sort of international body, has imposed these rules on us that we don't necessarily subscribe to. So that's how it looks from the perspective of these African governments, which I'm very sympathetic to that position on its face, because they've got development goals like every government. They've got objectives that they're trying to achieve in their country, and money is always in short supply. So that, from that standpoint, it makes sense. The issue with it is that I see is there's a precedent for this. It happened before. CITES allowed a number of African countries to make a one-off sale with some conditions. The ivory had to be kind of serial numbered and things like that. And what it did, unfortunately, that one-off legal sale created a lot of cover for the illegal industry. So that ivory obviously hit the market, and it became at the consumer level, at the kind of buyer level, it became more or less impossible to determine if the ivory you were purchasing was from a legal sale approved by CITES or illegal stuff that had been dumped on the market kind of under the cover and under the guise of that legal sale. So
It's muddied
that
the waters a little.
it's muddied the waters. And insofar as this concept of flooding the market, I'm very skeptical of that notion. And the kind of example I would use, and without being an expert in this stuff particularly, but I think I have enough of a grasp on it that it's a valid kind of comparison, is the diamond trade, for example. Like, diamonds are not a rare mineral by any stretch of the imagination. They're mined in a range of different places in fairly vast quantities. The reason why the price of diamonds is high is not because of the scarcity of diamonds. It's high because there's a cartel, essentially, that controls the international trade of diamonds and trickles them onto the market in such a way that they keep the prices exactly where they want them to optimize, profit, essentially. So my concern with making a big one-off sale of ivory to the Asian market in an effort to flood it and somehow drop the price of ivory and therefore eliminate the incentive for poaching, I'm very skeptical that would work, because I'm almost certain that there's already some form of cartel in place in Asia that controls the supply of the ivory, both the remnants of those previous legal sales and the illegal product that's now, sort of predominant. And I would be very, very skeptical that cartel would allow themselves to be flooded with legal product. I think you'd find that they'd instantly gain control of the supply chain, and the price of ivory would remain artificially
Steady.
high. Yeah, that would be my guess.
It's so hard to understand all that from this side of the world, and it's very interesting hearing an Australian accent explain all that from that side of the world. And our government over here bans silly things like bringing in lions and certain animals we can't bring in through the CITES stuff. Yeah. And it's very similar to that. I feel like the animal's dead. Once that's happened, whether we bring it back or not doesn't really matter. And I now understand everything you just explained. I hadn't thought about or didn't know about that side of it, and I appreciate you sharing that perspective. But I can then, people complaining about the piles, these are animals that have already died. The ivory's not harvested from a live animal. It's, so whether they sell it or not, it's kind of sitting there wasting away and really doing nothing. But like you said, that's a massive payload just sitting in one pile, not being allowed to be used.
Yeah, it is. It's hard to wrap your head around, right? But on the other side of the coin, as you say, those animals are dead. So where I always focus is on the ones that are still alive, right? And what impact is the sale of those tusks going to have on the ones that are still walking around? And it's the same thing with what you're talking about with the Australian government kind of doing this unilateral ban on lion and leopard and so on and these other imports. And, you know, when it's not, the US isn't immune to that either. US Fish and Wildlife have come out with some really arbitrary and stupid trophy import restrictions. And what I would say to anyone, and I mean, if I ever had the opportunity to talk to people that are decision makers in that world, I would say I can quite literally show you places on the ground, because I'm sure that what it's motivated by, what I think it's motivated by actually more than anything is animosity towards what is perceived as sort of quote unquote trophy hunting, right? And the kind of person that engages in that activity. So I think it's actually a really bad faith thing to do, these arbitrary restrictions. But if we take them at face value, what they would say their motivation is, how they would articulate it, it's going to be, oh, it's to protect lions, it's to protect leopards. Well, I could show you places where, because of reduced revenue from hunting, and hunting only was the only thing standing between that area being a place where wildlife can thrive and exist and it being completely depleted by human activity, I could quite literally take you to places where years ago, before Cecil the lion, before these arbitrary restrictions on lion imports and so on and so forth, there was wilderness, there was a thriving population of lions because of the protection that hunting afforded. All those things I was referring to previously: community development, anti-poaching, so on and so forth. Now, because of lost revenue, that area is depleted. It's been depleted by illegal logging, sometimes illegal mining, agricultural encroachment, and poaching itself. And now there are zero lions there. So if the stated purpose is to help lions and protect lions from becoming endangered or ultimately extinct, then arbitrary restrictions on trophy imports it's counterintuitive, but I can absolutely show you evidence on the ground that it's detrimental rather than beneficial.
When you're talking about Africa and Australia, most people just go straight to the Disney stuff, straight to the elephants and
Yeah.
things like that. And
Yeah.
I personally haven't done any elephant stuff. The wife has said to me it's the only animal out of the whole animal kingdom she won't let me shoot because it's her favourite, and that's fine. I'll definitely partake in a hunt when someone else goes one day. And please correct me if I'm wrong, but some of these hunts are done on, I'm just going to use elephants in this example. Some of these hunts are done on older animals past their prime, not a whole lot of benefit to the herd. And the killing of that animal benefits the rest of the herd, because that money then goes back into all these things you're mentioning down the line that allow the rest of the herd to continue to grow older and older and bigger and live stronger and better. Is that
correct?
A fair representation?
Yeah, most definitely. The most important thing that people need to focus on when they think about African wildlife, for sure, there's the Disney factor, right? Where charismatic megafauna, right, is the term. Lions, leopards, elephants, rhinos, these type of things tend to capture people's imagination in the same way, in a way that an antelope would not, for example. But the absolute key to the survival of wildlife on the African continent, or anywhere for that matter, is habitat. If you lose the habitat, you can make your best efforts to try and reintroduce certain species and so on and so forth. But if you don't have adequate habitat, you're never going to get anywhere with that. Those efforts are going to go nowhere. You need intact habitat for those species to be able to thrive, for them to be able to even just exist. So what we're focused on with our model and our work is protecting habitat. And people also don't realize how quickly it can be lost. And once it's lost, it's all but impossible to bring back. I mean, it could be done with enormous investment, but again, the incentives aren't there in many ways. If you've got an area that's completely depleted by agriculture, to bring it back around to wilderness is going to cost just a vast sum of money. And then there's political challenges too. If the people are there farming, well, there's some custodial right. How do you then evict them? So what our real, all our efforts kind of boil down to is trying to keep these wilderness areas intact, trying to limit the amount of, or where we can completely, stop human encroachment into this wildlife habitat, because truly when it's lost, it's lost forever.
Is agriculture the quickest way for habitat destruction?
Yeah, most definitely. Most definitely. So we talk about Luganzo, all 2 million acres of it. Our estimate, I mean, from talking to like our trackers, government officials in the local area, Roger and Derek, who've got a long history in that area operating, um, just generally people who are familiar with the area. Our estimate is if we stopped our activities tomorrow, in 2 years, it'd be destroyed.
That's incredible.
Gone for good. Nothing there. So that's what we're up against.
How do you fight that? Like that's a massive battle. That the hunting's only part of it. Then you're full time battling that.
It is a battle, but it's a battle worth fighting, because if we don't, again, we'll never have it back. It'll never come back. And who loses out on that is first and foremost the Tanzanian people, because that opportunity, the revenue that area can generate over time, if it's preserved and kept as a wilderness area, far exceeds the benefit that it would offer to people who are going in there grazing some cows or whatever, or cutting down the trees. The long-term benefit to the Tanzanian people is in it remaining as a wilderness area. So they lose out first and foremost, but humanity loses out, because those species that are lost are, they're incredible animals. I mean, and it's not just the lions and the leopards and the buffalo. It's, there's these beautiful bird life there. There's incredible reptile life. There's insect life. The flora. The trees, the Brachystegia woodland, or Miombo woodland as we call it, is just incredible. It's a beautiful environment, a beautiful habitat. So to lose that would be a great shame for all of humanity, frankly. And so it's a fight worth having, but it's a fight that needs to be done in a smart way, because it can't be all enforcement and all heavy-handed. It doesn't work. There's too many people. The pressure's too great. We'll be overwhelmed. So what we need to do is have people buy into this and understand what it is that we're trying to do there, and how this can benefit their community specifically and their country as a whole. And I think that's something that we're making a lot of headway in that regard. We really have buy-in from these communities into what we're trying to achieve in these game reserves.
Oh, I want to touch on two things: revenue and on the photographic side of things. But before I go to that, on the buy-in side of it, is there a way for me to buy an acre so that I can be a lord of Tanzania from over here, and like you can in Scotland or something? Is there, other than donations and things, how do other people buy in or support?
Yeah, it's very complicated. In terms of, I mean, land ownership and that, you can more or less rule that out. The things that I would say is, we have a wonderful foundation. It's called Robin Hurt Wildlife Foundation. You can find that on Google. The work that we do through that foundation. I mean, you can see on the website, it's real. It's real on the ground stuff that's making benefit, creating benefits for communities and moving the needle on conservation stuff. So yeah, donations there are always you know appreciated, and it's not one of these organizations that has a lot of administrative costs, a bunch of people working there. It's basically the Hurt family, and a couple of guys, myself included, that essentially donate our time because we believe in this, and it keeps us in the field. It keeps us doing what we love. So that's why we do it. And again, we believe this is a fight worth fighting. On the other side of the coin, come on safari. That is the number one driver of revenue. That's
When can you
what
have me?
keeps. Yeah. Whenever you're ready. This is what this is what drives our model, is people coming on safari. Foreign sportsmen pay for all this work. So without them, we can't do it. And so yeah, if you have the means and the inclination, now's a great time.
Well, that links into my previous comment on revenue,
Mm.
and I could count hundreds of times when people say this. Oh, why don't you just take photos of the animals? And
Yeah.
we hear this, and when I say we, I mean people in this sort of circle. We hear people talking about photographic safaris and how little money they actually bring to a community to go and, going to some of the big game reserves down in South Africa and things, a little bit different because they're high traffic areas. But how many people are traveling to Tanzania to take photos?
Yes, so right. Tanzania does have, I would say a pretty solid photographic tourism industry, and I can see the temptation that people would have to say, okay, well, let's, you just swap the gun for the camera and everything's better, right? Here's the issue. So Tanzania, I want to say mainland Tanzania has, I think it's 16 national parks already, right? Which is set aside exclusively for photo tourism. There's no hunting going on in there. There's no other kind of alternative use. They're just photo tourism. Of those, I think it's 3 or 4 generate enough revenue from tourists coming to actually cover the costs of keeping that national park intact. So,
not even
patrolling the boundaries.
In the green.
Right. Yep. Exactly. So the bulk of them require outside support from Treasury in order to keep them from being just lost, right, to those same forces that we're up against with our game reserves: encroachment, poaching, illegal grazing, so on and so forth. So if you look at that, you've got all these national parks, all these areas are set aside. 3 or 4 of them generate enough revenue, and all of them are in northern Tanzania, right? And like the names are going to be very familiar. It's like Ngorongoro Crater, Serengeti, Tarangire. Okay, so these ones get enough visitors because they're accessible enough. They're up on that that plateau in northern Tanzania where the climate's very agreeable. Okay, it's not scorching hot, it's not humid. There's no tsetse flies really to speak of up there. I mean, not large numbers anyway. It's just a very easy circuit for tourists to do. And then back to what I was saying previously with our northern Masailand area, that volcanic soil, that particular, that high elevation, the rainfall and so on there allows an enormous amount of game to congregate, right? So people can go out in a day and see wildebeest in the thousands, zebra in the thousands, gazelles, and just this, this sort of, it's like this Garden of Eden, really. But not every habitat in Tanzania is like that. So Western Tanzania, for example, areas of central and southern Tanzania, it's much sandier soil. It's that miombo woodland, which doesn't support huge concentrations of game. Now, that's not saying there's not a lot of game there. There is, but it's much more spread out. Aside from that, Western Tanzania is harder to reach. It's a 2.5-hour charter flight or a 2-day drive to get out to Luganzo from anywhere where you could fly into with a commercial plane. It's the middle of nowhere. There's a lot of tsetse flies out there. There's a lot of mosquitoes because of the lakes and rivers. It gets hot. The road infrastructure isn't as good. So all these things combine to make an area that's much less accessible for phototourism. And honestly, the animals aren't in huge concentrations, and they're not habituated like they are in the northern national parks. So, they see the car, they tend to run off. Um, it wouldn't work in the same way. And I'm not saying that phototourism can't be improved or developed in other areas of Tanzania. It certainly could. I'm not opposed to that, but the Tanzanian government has set aside 40% of the total landmass for some form of conservation activity, hunting included. And our system works. The results are there for everyone to see. We can prove it works. The notion that you could just replace it all with phototourism overnight, or even in some reasonable period of time, is flawed. It really is. People aren't gonna flock to these areas in the same way they will to the Serengeti or whatever. And aside from that, people forget that an area like the Serengeti or the Ngorongoro crater, which has got thousands and thousands and thousands of people visiting it every day, it's not zero impact. That's a lot of driving on roads, which creates, erosion. That's a lot of trash that's being generated in those wilderness areas.
Is
It's
it
a lot of,
infrastructure built around it to support it too? Your gas
for
stations and things like that?
sure. Yeah, there is. I mean, sort of on the outskirts, but certainly, yeah, within the parks too. There's an enormous amount of, yeah, human waste, as well as sort of like food waste, plastic waste, that's generated. There's pollution from all the vehicles. There's the vehicles break down, and there's all these things that you have to consider. I mean, it really does have an impact on the landscape. I mean, no tourist, sort of photo tourist doing the regular circuit would ever see it. But I've been to these villages on the outskirts of some of the national parks, and the amount of trash that's dumped there, by safari operators essentially coming, they can't dump it in the parks. They come out of the park and dump it at the nearest village. And there's just like these mountains of trash, that are polluting that environment. I mean, the notion that phototourism is somehow just inherently lower impact than hunting, I think is a flawed one, because if you take away, people's sort of reticence around like killing things, the amount of vehicles that go through our areas, the amount of waste that's generated by our camp is so limited compared to a photographic area.
And revenue wise, do you think it'd be 10 photographic people to one hunter? I think it'd be more than that
Oh, I
as
think
far as
more.
value.
Yeah, I would think more. I would have
So,
to. Yeah, I'd have to run the numbers, but I think it'd be a good bit more.
yeah, if let's just say 20, well, that's 20 vehicle, 20 people versus, one or two people on your safaris for the same, well, probably they're there for less time causing more damage than the hunters there
For
for
sure.
10, 21 days and then leaving less
Yeah,
of a
for
footprint.
sure.
It's crazy to see that side of it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that, I enjoy a national park visit as much as the next man. I truly do. The Tanzania's national parks for sure are just incredible, especially some of the kind of lesser known ones. But the other thing I point out to some people, that doesn't always get the best sort of response, is that, the lion that lays in the shade of your Land Cruiser, that's a habituated animal. That's not their natural state. That's not how they behave, quote unquote, in the wild. That's a state that's been induced through constant vehicle traffic, to where if they ran away from them every time they saw a vehicle, they'd burn so much energy that they wouldn't be able to replace it through nutrition and they'd die. So
Just a
they, you know,
desensitization.
yeah, they realize that, and then they eventually just kind of get over it and go and carry on with their life. And then even, you know, to the point where they'll use the vehicles and stuff to their advantage to some extent, and, you know, go lay in the shade of them or whatever. But I truly think that it's important, and I wish more phototourism people recognized that, you know, those animals being sort of so habituated like that isn't truly their natural state.
I want to hear your opinion on not change topics, but change direction a little bit. My African
Mm.
experience has been South Africa. I mean, I did a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of touristy stuff, Botswana, Mozambique, Vic Falls,
Uh-huh.
um, doing the bungee jump at Vic Falls, and on the way up, finding all the frayed rubber strands and wondering how many people are left before this thing snaps. But that's
Yeah.
sort of my experience, and it's still a little bit more off the beaten track than most tourists. But comparison to Tanzania, or what are your thoughts and opinions from an industry point of view on South African hunting and the way it's sort of operated down there?
It's obviously very different. And I would say my opinions are going to be based on some firsthand stuff. I've been down there and checked it out a little bit, but not. I'm by no means an expert on the South African model. Um, and there are certainly aspects of it. I think that for me are tough to kind of get my head around. So one would be, you know, high fence stuff. I don't have an issue with it in terms of, you know, the ethics or whatever. I think you can't argue with the success of that model and of that program, particularly with reference to South Africa and increasing numbers of game and certain species of game that were kind of really on the brink for a while. So I can't argue with the success of it, but personally, I wouldn't want to. I don't have a lot of interest in hunting behind a high fence. Um, and then captive bred lion stuff is another one that I struggle with. Um, Again, from a pure numbers perspective, are there more lions because of this industry that otherwise wouldn't exist? Um, yeah, it's hard to argue that there isn't, but I'm very uncomfortable with the notion of breeding a predator like that and then introducing it to an area and then sort of hunting it shortly afterwards. And I recognize that there's outfitters that do things differently. You know, the lions spend more time in the enclosure. Da 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 da. Again, I can't argue with the success of that model from the standpoint of there are more lions on the landscape than there otherwise would be. But personally, it's not for me. But you know, I have sort of reservations about it, and I wonder if, from a kind of public relations standpoint, if it's good for our industry and our sport as a whole. I have some sort of burning questions about that. But to kind of, I guess, to give a like a broad brush of how I feel about the South African conservation model, it just comes down to that. I can't argue with its success. I mean, millions and millions ahead of game that otherwise would be not there and have cattle and goats and sheep in their place are there because of that model. So it's clearly working.
Would you be able to explain the difference maybe on the way that you hunt? Or let's just say I've turned up with you and we're on a 10-day safari and a couple of
Mm-hmm.
target species. I'm not sure what you sort of specialize in or what your favorites are, but how does a hunt play out up in Tanzania? I understand how it works in South Africa. Can you explain it?
Yep. Yeah. So, I mean, first and foremost, so usually our kind of, I would say the sort of the linchpin of every one of our safaris is typically buffalo. Northern Tanzania, we do a lot of plains game hunting because we have some specialized species there that you really can't hunt anywhere else nowadays. I mean, there's some exceptions to that, but generally speaking, they're kind of northern Tanzania specifically is where you can get an opportunity to hunt those species.
Can you name one out?
Um,
Just out of interest.
yeah, so Grant's gazelle, Robert's gazelle, fringe-eared oryx, lesser kudu, gerenuk, white-bearded wildebeest, um, and I'm probably missing one or two, but that's sort of Robert's gazelle is another one. Chandler's mountain reedbuck is another one. So there's a kind of handful of these specialized species that and it's not that they're few in number as such, or that they're sort of populations in decline. It's just that they're because of the nature of the Rift Valley and the kind of landscape around there, they're just sort of geographically isolated species. They're just endemic to like one specific area.
Those fringe-eared oryx are pretty incredible looking.
Beautiful, yeah,
Well, they are.
gorgeous. Yeah, they're a
A little bit
beautiful
Lord of the
animal.
Rings, Dobby sort of style, but
Yeah, they're neat. So a lot of people will be familiar with the gemsbuck or the oryx of southern Africa. They're a little smaller and more compact in the body. A sort of like a more of a reddish brown color than a kind of slate gray. They have slightly different facial markings, and then yeah, these tufts on the end of their ears. But they're a beautiful, beautiful animal. Um, but yeah, so we'll go out. All the areas we'll hunt are wilderness areas to some degree or another. That's not to exclude the possibility of there being some human activity there. Certainly in our northern Masailand area, there's a number of villages, and you'll see people in sort of permanent dwellings and seasonal dwellings. You'll run into people that are out grazing goats and cattle and sheep throughout the course of the hunt, and then in other areas of the concession there'll be agricultural activities going on. Um, so you'll definitely see that, um, but all the animals you're hunting are free ranging. The one thing you'll never see is a fence, other than one made from thorn trees to protect someone's cattle at night. You'll never see any sort of fence. And there's never been any sort of reintroduction or any of that type of stuff done in those areas, in any significant way. So all those animals are totally wild, sort of ancestral stock. And then if the same hunt, 10-day buffalo hunt happening in Luganzo Game Reserve, it's an area that's completely devoid of human habitation. So outside of our roads, our tracks, essentially, and then every now and then you might see a beehive or that's been hung in a tree, or maybe even potentially an old poacher's camp or something like that constructed from sticks. You won't see any evidence of any sort of human activity whatsoever. And of course, that area is completely unfenced. As far as the hunting itself, what northern Masailand is going to be a little more of the kind of, I would say, spot and stalk heavy. So you're either seeing stuff from the vehicle far away and then stopping the vehicle and getting off to stalk it, or going driving to a vantage point where you can get up high and look out over a sort of wide area and see different species of game that and spot them, and then potentially kind of go off looking for those. And then a good bit of tracking too. So particularly with species like lesser kudu, you'll go to areas where they frequent, and look for their tracks and look for a good sized track and follow it until you either locate that animal or potentially not. And then Luganzo, same sort of deal. A little bit of using terrain to kind of get up high and look around for stuff. But really, when it comes down to it, particularly with the buffalo hunting, it's going to be a tracking hunt. So you're going to water holes. You're driving tracks that we've kind of made, like little roads that we've made sort of strategically, so that we can see on the road tracks of buffalo that have gone, either coming from water, going to water, heading into their areas where they bed down for the day, where we can pick up their tracks crossing those roads, and then it's going to be getting off the car and following those tracks for as long as it takes.
On the buffalo hunting side of the world, definitely high
Yeah,
on the list for me personally. Can you
definitely.
explain what a duggar boy is? And It's a
Yeah.
there's a couple of
So
Facebook pages about Duggar boys and things, and I follow them regularly, and I understand what it means. But it's a term that refers to a certain type of, targeted buffalo.
yeah, for sure. So I think it's a Southern African term, but it's sort of permeated everywhere at this point. Um, it's referring to, I think, in some, I don't know where it is in Africa where it originates, but essentially Dugga, I believe, is a term for mud, and it's referring to like an old male buffalo that they tend to have a habit, particularly in areas where there's a lot of biting insects, which is pretty much everywhere they inhabit. They'll roll in mud at different times to kind of protect themselves from those insects a little bit. Um, Kind of keep themselves sort of clean. So yeah, it refers to these kind of old solitary males that are either on their own or purely in the company of other males, kind of bachelor males, which are the most desirable buffalo to hunt. And I think that's kind of true of everywhere. It certainly is for us. We have in our Maasai land area, we kind of have a hard rule around it. In Luganzo, it's absolutely our preference to hunt these single males, or bachelor groups of males. And what happens with buffalo is the herd structure itself is mainly kind of matriarchal. So the old females run the herds, um, and the bulls come and go at different times for breeding, but also being in the herd offers a degree of protection, in the sense that there's a lot more animals there. Your chances of being the one that gets picked off by lions are lower. There's more eyes, more ears, more noses to detect any predators that might be coming to bother the herd. And then a buffalo herd that's kind of being defensive is obviously an intimidating, an imposing unit for any predator to approach. Um, but there's a downside to being in the herd for bulls because there's obviously the strenuous nature of the mating activity itself. Buffalo bulls rarely fight. They'll spar and they'll spend a lot of time sizing each other up, but they're very well adapted, to be able to assess each other's relative strengths and avoid fights. When they do fight, it's usually pretty disastrous for one or often both, just because of how strong and powerful the animals are. And when they do fight, there tends to be very evenly matched ones. So it can turn into a bit of a battle royale. But they rarely fight. But what happens is when the herd's threatened, the bulls get pushed to the outside, and also just at night when the herd's feeding and they're kind of more alert. The females, because of just the way they orient themselves and the way they orient the herd, the bulls tend to be kind of on the outer edges of the herd, as a kind of defensive line, if you will. And that the upshot of all that is they do about 25% less feeding at night than the other buffalo, which combine that with the sort of, mating and mating related activities, and bulls in a herd tend to lose condition. Their physical condition will be in decline throughout the time that they're in the herd. So they'll, by necessity, at some point have to leave the herd, and go into a bachelor phase, either solitary or in the company of a number of other bulls, in order to regain condition. So do enough feeding that they're in better shape to rejoin the herd. So not every quote unquote Duggar boy or bachelor bull you find is post productive in the sense that they'd never go back into a herd, but the fact that they're in that bachelor phase at that particular time means they're a mature bull, and because of that reason, they're a good one to hunt. They're a good specimen, a good one to offtake from the population because they're not currently in their breeding phase. And then there's a good portion of them as well that are old enough to where they will not actually be able to ever gain enough condition in that bachelor phase that it makes sense for them to rejoin the herd. And you might see them kind of on the periphery of herds sometimes. They'll certainly, I've seen old bulls join up with herds for a brief period, to kind of just associate with them during an activity like feeding or drinking, or even bed down close to them for a period of time. But generally speaking, there's always a kind of cohort among the buffalo population that's done with breeding altogether.
Is
And
the
they're the
main
most desirable.
is the main herd bull at the time? Is
Mm.
he quite genetically blessed? Like, is that something they're sizing up with each other when they're? I'm assuming they're parallel walking to size each other up, and the one that stays, or is horn size obviously part of that?
Yeah, it certainly is. And there'll often be a number of herd bulls. It's not as kind of uh, you know,
Not
not
like
like
deer
with
where there's
species like elk, right? Yeah, exactly. Where there's like one and they will not tolerate any others. It's not necessarily that hard and fast. In a good sized buffalo herd, you'll see there'll be a number of mature males there. And certainly there'll be a hierarchy among those males for the period they're in the herd. But yeah, oftentimes those breeder bulls are very impressive specimens. Truly impressive specimens, big horns, everything else. But a lot of times you'll look at them and they're young. They're just there's no getting away from it. They're not fully mature in the way that would constitute a proper buffalo trophy. They might even be a little bit soft in the boss still.
Sure. And I was just going to get into that, describing a proper buffalo trophy, meaning bosses that, fully hard across or touch each other,
Yeah,
horns that are broomed off on top or even broken off. And
yeah.
a term that it's come up before in a previous episode was a scrum cap bull. And
Mm.
how often are you seeing those sorts of guys? And just to explain that, that's one where both horns or have snapped off at the side of the bell where they're quite close to the skull and actually doesn't protrude out.
Yeah,
Is that
I
very
would
irregular?
say it's pretty uncommon. Yeah, that's an ancient buffalo, and particularly in areas where you have a fairly robust lion population, is going to be
Sure.
hard for them to
Fight them off.
attain that sort of age. Yeah,
Yeah.
that
So that's
like a
that's
buffalo.
more of a different area thing where there's less predation.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see them for sure. That one in Luganzo that hit Roger hurt was a scrum cap, both horns broken off, so they're around. I would say, yeah, I mean, you definitely see them. They're out there for sure. But yeah, fully hard boss is what we're looking for, obviously. And then some buffalo genetically the bosses won't touch. They'll always have a little strip of skin kind of through the middle, and that doesn't necessarily, oftentimes they will. Sometimes the bosses will completely merge. Other times there'll always be this kind of strip of bare skin kind of through the middle of the horns, and that's not unusual. But we're looking for no sort of soft, pulpy, skin around that boss. Um, and yeah, if the horns are broomed off, worn off, those tips typically will be on those older males. That component of the tip that kind of curves a little bit back towards the neck, that'll usually all be worn off, typically, and not always, but oftentimes it will. And then the really old ones, you'll start to get so that smooth, shiny look to the horns. All those kind of rough ridges and everything will have been worn down pretty significantly over years and years of pushing through vegetation and rubbing in mud and so on. Yeah, to me, width, excluding obviously very wide trophy is very desirable, but what a real buffalo trophy constitutes is an old bull.
I I think it's the next animal on the list for me. Muskox is
Yeah,
probably one of my top animals, and then
cool. Yeah,
I think buffalo is definitely, the more I spend time over there, the more just the allure of, and like you said right at the start, there's so much more to an African safari than even just killing an animal, but the whole experience. And I think buffalo hunting is pretty pure if it's done in a pure form. I mean, there's fenced options as well for perfectly manicured
sure.
sized things, but for the way you guys are operating over there. It seems like it's exciting. It's exciting to hear about,
It is.
and I will get over there eventually, and it'd be cool to see it. Now, you mentioned Roger's run in with a buff, and I don't really want to go into the story too much because you guys covered it
Yeah.
pretty dang well in your MeatEater episode, and I can't remember what number
Yeah.
episode it was, but it was I was traveling to a trip. I was traveling to deer camp on when that came out, and I think I had 4 messages from friends. They said, "Man, got to listen to this current episode," and I turned it on and we listened to it the whole drive up to deer camp just silently, and enjoyed it. And that's how I came across you. But how did that episode come about, and how did that interaction happen?
Yeah. So when I'm not in Africa, home is, I live just outside Bozeman, Montana, which is where MeatEater is headquartered. And so just through living in that community for a number of years, I have some really good friends that are involved with MeatEater, and are personal friends with Stephen Rinella as well. So I had the opportunity to meet him socially, which was really cool. I mean, he's obviously a fascinating guy, and I just think he's done just a terrific job of communicating, um, the realities of hunting to the kind of non-hunting public, which I mean, I kind of sort of have some thoughts on that. I'd like to expand on that a little bit in a minute here, but yeah, getting the opportunity to meet him socially, and then introducing him to Roger as well, which was really neat. And he sort of said, "Yeah, you guys should come on the podcast, and Roger should tell his story, and you guys can speak just a little bit more generally, I think, about African hunting, because it is. I mean, I'm sure you've picked up on it. Is kind of it not well understood, and it's a kind of unfortunate thing that I've noticed, that there's people, even hunters, in the sort of hunting community, that hunt deer or elk or whatever, and people in, I'm sure it's the same in Australia, people that hunt deer and pigs and that kind of sort of have this sort of reticence and kind of this wariness around African hunting, for whatever reason. So I think it was a great opportunity to break down some of those barriers and just talk about what we do in a really authentic way. And also, yeah, a little bit of excitement with Roger's story there. There's always a few stories that come out of this job if you do it long enough.
I want to know, has he run into that buffalo again? Like, has he found it yet? I know he said
No,
that was his
no, we looked
goal.
for it. We looked for it on the last safari, and we didn't see any sign of it. We didn't find its tracks in the areas that it had been kind of frequenting. I mean, I would say, yeah, every day that goes by, the odds of that buffalo not being eaten by a lion or something are less and less. So it's, yeah, it's very, that thing's got to be on its last legs. But we'll see. Maybe it's still out there. He's pretty relentless. Like, he's going to be looking for it, and the trackers are looking for it. The anti-poaching guys are looking for it. So if there's
Everyone's
ever
involved.
any sign of it, yeah, everyone's involved. I mean, it's a needle in a haystack type deal, to be honest with you. But if it's ever spotted, yeah, Roger will be there.
It'll just be everyone sit on that while I get there kind of deal. And even if
Yeah, for
it's a
sure.
dead head that you find, that's even a smaller needle in a haystack because you're not finding tracks, you're just finding.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And over there, the deadheads don't last like they do in other places. A lot of animals over there want calcium, so they'll chew on the bones, so the bones will get all chewed up. And then there's these kind of, I don't know what kind of bug they are. They must be some sort of worm that kind of eats the actual horn material itself. And so, yeah, deadheads don't last too long in Africa. But yeah, I really hope for Roger that it isn't the end of the story, that thing just sort of went quietly into the night. I do hope they get their showdown, but maybe it's a little too Hollywood. Maybe that's a little bit wishful thinking.
On the, I want to, you mentioned there's some thoughts on things you want to talk about with Rinella, and I want to get to that. But talking about Bozeman and people having a connection with one particular animal. Have you been out to Hell's Auroran out at Jardine?
Yes. Yeah, I have been out there before. Yeah.
You've met Warren, the guy who owns it?
I have not met him personally. I've met some of the people he that work for him, but not met him personally. But fascinating guy by all accounts.
Yeah, very. So I actually did some time there guiding, and uh, he has this continual run in with a grizzly called, he calls it Hannibal. And every year we get these updates during the season. I found his tracks, and it's an on. Well, it's not a joke, but it's an ongoing joking story that he's had a run in with it, and he has at some point. It scratched him up in a brawl, and he's
Oh,
always
really?
he plays up the story a little bit, I think. But I'm just waiting for them. The end's going to come. He's going to find its body at some point, and that'll be, he's going to outlive it. That's how it's going to work. But it's just,
Yeah.
I enjoy every season. We get these little updates of, a photo of Hannibal 800 meters away on the other side of a cliff, and then there's, footprints on his track. And he's like you guys. He can spot a specific bear's track, and he knows that he's got a limp, and that's sort of the imprint he leaves in the snow. But yeah, it's a interesting little tidbit about that little. Oh yeah, I really like Bozeman. It's a cracking town.
Yeah,
It's
it's
one of the
great. It's
nicest
a wonderful
airports
area.
too.
Oh, yeah, it's a world-class airport for sure. I love it. Yeah, I mean, isn't yeah, it's wonderful. This town, it's definitely changing a lot, that area, but yeah, it's still a marvelous place to be. But yeah, we like these sort of stories, don't we? As people, where it's like one animal, like a kind of, I don't know, like a Moby Dick type um, sort of thing, where it's like one man, one animal.
Well, hunting. I mean, you're targeting maybe a target species, or there's something. But if you can narrow that down further to one particular animal, I've got one out here on a private block I've been on. It's one particular fallow that I've seen on cameras. I've only ever seen him when I'm driving into the property. I've never seen him in a hunting opportunity. And my
Mm.
wife spotted him several years ago, and he was quite light coloured fallow. Easy to just. It's unmistakable, and I just hope no one else has shot him. And I don't even know if I would if I got the opportunity. I shouldn't say that. I definitely would, but I nearly wish he just lives out his life completely and no one gets him. He's an elusive sort of ghost. But
Yeah,
it's
it
nice
is.
to have that continual thought every season. Oh, will I see that guy again? I haven't named
I
him. I'm
wonder
not
if I'll
that
see him.
dedicated.
Yeah, that's one of the things I really enjoy about hunting the big cats, leopard and lion, is you're hunting an individual. You're being very selective about the one you're going to take.
And their
Just
personality traits would be reflective in the way you hunt them. Each one's
They
different.
do. Yeah, they do. They absolutely have personalities. The leopard hunt I just did, it was a textbook example. It was a beautiful old cat um, that we had a lot of baits up, and I typically try to put a trail camera on a bait if I can. I like to be quite, I think, like most guys that are into cat hunting, I like to be quite tactical about where I set up my, how I, do my setup, and think kind of deeply about how it's all going to go down. And I'll often put a trail camera there just to get a sense of, what I'm dealing with in terms of the cat. For the lions, it's particularly important because I need to make sure they're old enough and they're not a male that's with a pride, and so on and so forth. But for leopard, I like to do it too, to get a look at the cat and get a sense of when he feeds. Um, but I'd run out of trail cameras. I'd sort of set up all my trail cameras. They're all far away, and I had a bait that was hit, and there was a very good track at the base of the tree. But the feeding itself, it's interesting. When you see a female leopard feed, it'll make these kind of dainty little bites in the meat, and the males tend to be kind of unmistakable. They'll like crack the bones and sort of tear off these big chunks. But it was a very light. I mean, this leopard had fed very lightly, but the track was a good one, so I opted to build a blind and sit for it. Um, and kind of long story short, this cat really gave us a run around for a number of days. You know, it had come and it had climbed the tree. Well, first of all, it had walked right up to the blind, and it'd be sniffing at the blind about a foot away from us while we're sitting there. Thankfully, the wind was non-existent at the time, and you know, the small sort of screen of grass between us and this big leopard was pretty exciting stuff. And it would sort of mark its territory right in front of the blind, which was an interesting experience. And then it'd climb the tree and feed, but it'd leave before shooting light. Um, so yeah, it was a real chess game. You know, we had to keep sort of changing things up to where we thought we could get a chance at this cat, and ultimately we were successful. And it was wonderful. But just learning this cat's personality through the course of the hunt, the way he liked to do things, the way he liked to feed, the when he'd like to feed, when he'd come to the bait, how he'd check out the blind, how he'd vocalize, where he'd go after he was done feeding. You know, all these things we got to learn about him, and it was fascinating. We really felt like we knew him personally at the culmination of that hunt, which made it all the more special.
Is there some that you see several seasons in a row?
Oh yeah, for sure. Oh, definitely. Yeah, yeah. Of numerous different species. There's buffalo that I've seen a number of times and tried to get with various clients and just not been successful. There's animals like sable and roan that I've seen 2 or 3 times and haven't been able to get. I mean, yeah, really, there's a number of things. The kudu, for sure, I've seen multiple times that haven't been able to get. Um, Plenty of cats. Plenty of lions and leopards that I've had on bait more than once and just not been able to make it happen. So yeah, it's not unusual at all.
I want to not circle back completely, but just give you a chance to. Yeah, there was something you mentioned there about Steve and his impact on the community, I suppose, and he's definitely a leader in podcasting in general in the hunting world, but the conservation side of things and just even on his show, he's a leader in the way that thing's edited and produced and put out there. And
yeah,
I mean, he's definitely someone I'd love to meet personally, and you're probably as close as I'm ever going to get to shaking his hand, just having a chat with you. I'll keep pestering.
Well, you never know. You never know. I mean, he's an exceptional guy, and what I think he's done a marvelous job of is communicating to the, let's call it, the non-hunting public as opposed to the anti-hunting public. And I think that's an important distinction. You know, I I was talking recently. I was having a conversation with Natasha Illenberg, I think she's the only woman who's a professional hunter in East Africa at the moment, and she's firmly convinced that she can bring anyone around to our side. And I mean, Natasha's this sort of tall, statuesque blonde, so she might well be way more persuasive than me. But I always find, and I've sort of had this long running theory, that the best possible, you know, sort of demographic that we can work on as passionate hunters is people that are not anti-hunting but don't hunt and don't really get it. And I think Stephen Rinella has done as good a job as can be possibly done articulating the value of hunting and using this concept of food, and the quality of food you can derive as a hunter from the landscape to really get our message across to people that aren't necessarily antagonistic or anti-hunting, but just don't do it and don't necessarily have aren't really inclined heavily either way, or maybe you're a little bit negatively inclined, but not sort of in a way that's sort of fatal.
Yeah, a real fence sitter or just
yeah, for sure. Or someone who just never really thought about it in any sort of significant way. And I think he's just done a marvelous job. And so why that's important, you know, and I have to I've got to give you some credit here as well. in terms of what I know about your work. And it's something that's really encouraging for me to see a real hunting culture developing in Australia. And I've kind of got to, I mean, I've got to kind of choose my words carefully because I don't spend much time in Australia at all these days, and I haven't lived there for a long time.
You
So
haven't lost the
every
accent
time
though, so you're still good.
no, it's still going strong. But every time I sort of make these broad statements about some aspect of something going on in Australia, I always kind of, rightly so too, I get called out for my outdated takes, my kind of cold takes on how things are there. But one thing that I always felt was not being done well in the hunting world in Australia when I was there, was I felt like there was an over reliance on this kind of talking point of, oh, we just, we do this to control feral animals. We do this to stop the ferals from kind of overrunning the place. That's why we hunt. And I think that it was, and there's obviously some truth to that. Hunting is an effective means of controlling introduced species, but the problem with it is, I think you open yourself up to being badly outflanked by these kind of anti-hunting elements to say, well, if it's such a thankless task, why don't we just drop 1080 out of an airplane or have a professional shooter shoot from a helicopter and take away this sort of thankless task, eliminate the requirement for you to put on your camo and go and, bang around the bush shooting things. And
Unfortunately,
so,
it's now come to full fruition where 1080 is the preferred method, and the contract shooters are just
for sure.
shooting crazily to try and get the numbers
Yeah.
down. That Hunter Valley region, there's 20,000 or so deer shot out of there in one season by the choppers.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
that's on the
I
back of
think
us using that as an excuse. Oh, we're just shooting ferals.
yeah, no, for sure. And I think that's a big problem. And that's where I have to commend you, from looking at the way that you communicate about hunting is, to me, there's a new generation of Australian hunting culture developing where there's guys out there that are saying, no, this isn't, I mean, yeah, okay, they're introduced species and this helps to control them, but that's not why we hunt. We hunt because it's a beautiful and respectful way to interact with the natural world. We hunt because, we enjoy it, and we hunt because we derive this beautiful food from these animals. And I think that that's the way we've got to approach it. And we've got to kind of view ourselves in some ways, particularly in places like Australia that are so urbanized, as this kind of almost like a dissident group, where if we don't push our truth into the mainstream, we're going to just be swept away by kind of like urban ignorance in many ways. And so I think the key to pushing out like the truth into the mainstream is for us to be, we need to be proud and really and honest about what it is that we do. And this kind of, oh well, we're just trying to control the ferals isn't going to cut it. We've got to say we do this because we love it, and explain ourselves and make an effort to do that. And then it can be awkward at different times, but I think that's where Rinella's been so effective, especially now in this world where so many people, even people in urban areas, are like really reconsidering food systems and where they get their food from, and how like the future of farming and factory farming and so on. I think the food is a really powerful tool we can use as hunters to talk about what we do and to help explain why it's so important to us and what it means to us. And so I'm really encouraged to see, guys like yourself out there, obviously super passionate, and kind of, pushing all those talking points into the mainstream in Australia, because I it's just been missing in my point of view.
I appreciate those comments. It's nice to hear. Uh,
Yeah.
And I think that on the Rinella side of things, I think the ripple effect of his approach, his production value, his morals, is what I nearly want to say single-handedly is changing the hunting community's aspect and outlook here in Australia. I don't know. I definitely look up to him as someone who has done a lot for the industry, and I can't wait to see. You know, he's only young; he's still got a lot of years ahead of him. What's going to change in the future? And I aspire to be a fifth of what he can be and what he can produce. But to see just regular people, so I'm a fencer. That's my normal job. It's never far from my conversation with clients that I hunt.
Yeah.
Either wearing a camo hat or
Yeah.
one particular lady recently, I gave her a discount because she said her brother's got 6,000 acres out at Glen Innes. And anyway, I gave her the discount, did the fence, and I'm going up there in 2 weeks to go and check it out. But
Nice.
people like that, and I'll just be talking to them, and they'll say to me, "Have you seen this MeatEater show?" And
Yeah.
like, I'll pretend, "Oh no, what's that about?" "Oh, it's this guy
Yeah.
who goes and hunts stuff, and sometimes he doesn't even get anything, but..." And then they relay everything that you and I know. But
Yeah.
to see that come from someone who has zero interest in doing it themselves
Yeah.
is exciting. And
No, it is.
doubling down on what you said, and I've said it before, it's that we don't particularly need more hunters. We just need less anti-hunters. And I think the food aspect is a great way to get there. And we spoke to a guy previously who his key to it was to take a food they already know and just change one element. So he does, Kentucky Fried Rabbit or something, where they've already got the texture, they've already got that in their brain, and they're like, "Oh, actually, that's pretty similar. What'd you put in it? Rabbit. Oh, wow." And then to do the venison stroganoffs and things like that. So the way he showcases that, Steve, is it's incredible to watch. And like I said, definitely envious of you for getting to shake his hand and to spend some personal time with him too, just away from the show, and to see the way he interacts. But I think your cross-section of the Australian hunting community is still on par, even though you don't live here. I'll give you that. And I'm seeing an increase in... It might be... My vision might be skewed because I'm sort of pushing myself down this niche, not niche, but this area myself, is the hunting side of things. I liken it, some people are shooters, some are hunters, and some are on their journey to being a hunter, and some never get there, and that's fine too. Some stay shooters. But I think the hunting community is growing, and it's growing in the right way for the right reasons. But we don't talk about it as much as we should. I'm very vocal.
Yeah.
I love chatting. You're the same. It's easy to have a conversation. We've been going at it for an hour and a half, and I feel like we're just scratching the surface. But there's a lot of people out there that do it. We've got the numbers to fight this sort of stuff at a government level, but we don't. I don't want to get into governments. I'm not a political person. Just on the duck side of things, especially, we're on the verge of losing that. Because
I think you're right.
There's 20,000 duck shooters in Victoria, or I'm just pulling that number. But the number of votes and the comments they're getting on the, where it's needed, and the support. We ran a support campaign to try and get donations. We ended up with $5,000 worth of donations, which is great. But like from a possible 20,000 people, that's nothing.
Yeah, no, it's not.
$1 each would have done more.
Yeah, would have done more. Yeah, it's a great shame, and I think that people, it's to people's detriment. I think there's been, again, I have to be careful. It's not everyone, but I do feel that there's been a culture in the past in Australia that I've experienced of hunters kind of going the route of the turtle, right? When under threat, pull your little head in, stay as quiet as possible, and hope that they don't take too much from you. But I think it's a failing, losing strategy. And if I look at the way that people in the US, hunters, fishermen, trappers, let's say sportsmen in general as kind of an overall term, have been able to band together and advocate for better opportunities to hunt, less restrictions on hunting, better, more sensible regulations that benefit wildlife and hunters and hunting opportunity. I think it's been done so well because people here or in the USA and people in I think it's the same with African hunters as well, but with particular reference to the US, sort of Bozeman is home now, if you will. They take the position that hunting is my right. It's a good thing to do. It's a respectful way to interact with nature. And if you try to take it away from me, we're going to raise holy hell. And I think that's what Australian hunters need to frankly get their head around.
And we're
And
a
not
little bit
only
scared.
that, yeah, a little bit scared, but not only that, but you're going to have, if you're serious about this sport, perpetuating, you're going to have some awkward conversations with people. I certainly have, particularly on the, I mean, look, you could consider yourself lucky. You don't have to talk to someone that isn't too keen on hunting about hunting lions and leopards and whatnot. But you're going to have to put yourself out there and explain it and become an ambassador for what you do. Otherwise, it's gonna go away, I'm afraid.
One thing I'm sort of championing and championing I can't remember the word, pushing for. Let's just rephrase that. And I mean, listeners are going to hear me say this regularly. It won't be every episode, but I'm going to remind you: do yourself the justice. Be articulate in what we do. Educate yourself in what we do and why we do it. Don't just say, "Oh, I like shooting stuff." It's a waste. It's a throwaway comment. It's a wasted opportunity to have that conversation with someone. And I know it's a bit rich coming from me saying be articulate. I'm one of probably the worst speakers in my family as far as English skills go. But I understand what I do for myself, and I understand why I want to do it. And I will talk to someone at a red light when we're crossing the road about that. It doesn't worry me what their response is. The other thing is happily listen to their response. I get this all the time. I was telling this person this and I was telling this person that. I said, well, what do they think about it? Well, I don't know. We never got to that point. They stormed off. I'm like, well, that was your missed opportunity. It goes both ways. It's a two-way conversation. Sure. And on that flight to Africa, I sat next to a lady that was going on a wine tasting tour who was a vegan and was anti-hunting. That's a long 14-hour direct to Jay Berg. Considering that came up in the first 15 minutes. The vegan part didn't. That turned up in the first hour when her meal turned up before mine, and it was vegan. So it was, but she left that, well, actually, I can't speak for her. I don't know how she left that conversation. I left that conversation feeling like I had given my side of the story in the best light I could. How she took that, that's up to her, and I'll never find out. That's the joys of flying randomly next to people. But no, I appreciate when your episode came up on MeatEater, the general consensus was, wow, what an amazing advert for the conservation conversation. Like, what an amazing spokesperson for African hunting, African wildlife management systems, and things like that. And then it even made it better that you're an Aussie. That it's was a nice cherry on the cake. And listen to Steve try and get his head around how we shoot kangaroos and things was pretty funny. And don't harvest them. But no, I appreciate the way you can verbalize what you do and what you're passionate about. And I appreciate the way you get that across to others. And I hope by having you on here, I can share that to others, and then others can learn from that as well. I want to, before we finish up, I want to go back to home. You keep saying home's Bozeman. Home's not Bozeman. Home's in Perth somewhere. Were you born in WA?
Yeah.
I can understand why you'd want to move away. I mean, WA is one of our worst states we don't talk about much. But no, I shouldn't say that. I've got some good friends over there, but they're very keen to move elsewhere. Let's say that. The government over there hasn't been nice to them during COVID.
No, it's.
But what
was
your hunting upbringing here in Australia? And you briefly touched on it with the slides from your uncle. That really intrigues me because I'm a first generation hunter. I don't have any ancestral connection to hunting. I don't have any stories growing up of going hunting. We grew up horse riding outdoors, which is fine. I got cool stories from that.
Yeah.
But
no doubt.
I'm intrigued by people who are, it's in their lineage, it's in their family. So
I was. It was close. It could have gone either way for me. So I was born in Perth, grew up in Perth, went to school in Perth. I have my father doesn't hunt. He does a little bit now, but at that time didn't at all. My mother had been hunting, but didn't particularly take to it or appreciate it at all, really. And we sort of had most of our time was spent in the city, doing city stuff. But my maternal grandfather, so my mum's dad, had a farm in the kind of south of Perth, kind of the sort of southwest region, and he was a big hunter. He'd
Was it one of the
grown up.
loops? Joondaloops?
What's that?
What was all the towns over there in Perth are loops?
So yeah, oh, yeah, not too far from one of the loops. It's actually called Harvey, but yeah, the town right over is Yarloop. So yeah, it's close to one of the loops. But he was a hunter. He grew up on a big sheep and wheat farm, and had kind of I guess been more of a shooter in his early days, as his father was and his grandfather was. But then he somehow, and I don't know if I ever really explored this with him, but in as many words, but I think what happened was he was a big competitive clay target shooter, and he kind of fell in with some guys that were involved in that sport that were big hunters, in terms of they'd go up to the Northern Territory and hunt, and then they'd go to Africa and hunt. And so that was kind of his introduction to it. And interestingly enough, for whatever reason, I always was just fascinated by it and just gravitated towards wanting to hunt. And he had been at that stage of his life by the time I was kind of old enough. He wasn't particularly interested in hunting anymore. I think for kind of reasons of my grandmother was someone who always kind of liked to keep up appearances, and she realized that it wasn't particularly popular in too many social circles, so she didn't like him talking about it too much. But he showed me a few things, and obviously the basics of firearm safety, which was pretty key, and we shot targets a bit together. But as far as the hunting stuff, I really, really wanted to do it. And I'll be honest with you, I was kind of in many ways like actively discouraged by a lot of people in my life from pursuing it and getting involved in it. But I genuinely just loved it. But I too, similar to you, had obviously had the family connection with it. But Pop didn't take me hunting that much. It was more like I just kind of, he'd go, oh yeah, go for it, go have a walk around, see what you can see. And so I was a little bit self-taught in a lot of ways. And I mean, I never really, there was a few guys that had, I'll take you out spotlighting or whatever, sort of his friends that he knew in town, but I never really had a sort of a hunting mentor as such that really took me out and taught me the ins and outs of it. So I was kind of self-taught in many ways. But I guess I had an introduction to the culture of it, and the kind of some of the literature. Pop had a lot of hunting books and stuff in his house still, and so getting to read that literature was, I think, pretty key, kind of formative. But yeah, it's, as it's a journey. You're never really full bottle. You're always kind of just trying to learn a little bit more and a little bit more. But I was lucky enough that I was young when I got into it, which I think really helps.
I was the same age. I was 19, 20, and self-taught, like you said. It's a journey. It's not a particularly fun one sometimes, doing things wrong.
No.
It's
you
we make mistakes, and I started as a shooter, definitely did some spotlighting, worked my way into hunting. It was only, I think I'd been shooting 2 years, 3 years, and then I ended up in Montana for the first season as an assistant packer over there at Hell's Aurora. And so it was a quick journey. It was like if I could draw it on a graph, it's definitely a high bell curve. It just hasn't dropped off yet.
Well, when you notice the difference, when you really, the first time, I would bet that 95% of Australian hunters get into hunting through kind of their first introduction to its shooting, right? Um, and and it's an important distinction to make, and I'm glad that you do it, because I do as well, and I believe the distinctions is critical, and that isn't to be denigrating people that shoot or enjoy spotlighting or whatever. I mean, it's fine, and it's a necessary activity in many cases, but that first time, I think that you realize the difference between shooting and hunting for someone that grew up in Australia is a powerful moment.
Definitely laid the foundations for the rest of my career. It's ended me where I am now, which is somewhere I never thought I'd be, but somewhere I'm excited to see where it heads. So, hey, I want to thank you. I'm not going to repeat what I said, but I thank you for what you've done for our industry and representing Australians well as well. And thank you for just articulating what we want to achieve as a community and being able to share your thoughts and knowledge. I've learned a lot tonight. I hope our listeners have. Traditionally in the past, our listeners probably aren't lovers of the African international side of things, which is a shame because it's something I love doing. But I really hope that this chat and this talk has opened a lot of minds and just I look forward to meeting you in person and continuing the conversation too, whether it be around the campfire
likewise,
or around a beer. But I'm sure I'll keep in touch, and I would love to come over to Tanzania at some point. It's a definitely exciting place.
Yeah, absolutely. Please do. I'd be thrilled to show you our little part of it here. And truly, I mean, sort of right back at you as far as keeping up the good work on communicating the importance of what we do. And in many ways, you're really up against it there in Australia in a way that I'm not in Tanzania. The beauty of Tanzania is the government is very committed to this this model of conservation, despite kind of outside forces. Sometimes they're very committed to this course of action, which is great for us. And obviously in the US, it's much more entrenched. So I think in many ways you have a harder road to hoe there in Australia, but I admire your commitment to it, and I think I do see the positive changes that you're talking about. I really do. Just in the communication online about it, and the discourse around hunting in Australia, I really see it moving in a super positive direction. And so, I mean, thank you for your influence on that. And for the people that that still aren't sure about African stuff or have questions, I mean, reach out to me. I don't know it all, but I'll do my best to do the research and kind of figure out how to explain it as best I can. Because I would say even if you have no inclination to come over here and ever do it and ever hunt African animals, I think everyone can appreciate them and recognize what value our industry has in keeping these wild places intact for those animals to live, and that's what we're going to keep doing.
How do listeners get in touch with you, Morgan? Where do they find you if they want to ask the hard
questions? So social media is a good one. So I'm on Instagram. It's Morgan Potter Hunting. I've got a website as well, which is morganpotterhunting.com. There's a form there that'll shoot me an email. So get in touch. I'm always happy to chat to like-minded sportsmen. And I recognize, it's great. I love having these long form discussions. But as we don't cover everything. I'm sure there's plenty of things people are wondering about. So if you have more in-depth questions, feel free to drop me a line. I'll get back to you as quick as I can. I'm obviously in the bush a lot. The internet's not either non-existent or pretty flaky, but when I'm in town, I'll get back to you. I promise.
Well, if the people want it, send the questions through to me, and we can always have a round two, Morgan.
Yeah, I'd love to. Anytime. It's a pleasure chatting with you. And yeah, it's nice to get back to the roots a little bit and kind of check in with Aussie hunters. I've got a lot of love for the home team.
Well, when you're back over, we will happily host you and go out and try and find that elusive buck I haven't seen this season. So
Yeah, exactly. Hopefully, I can make it over there before his natural life ends.
Righto, Morgan, I'd just like to thank you for joining us and see you for now.
Thanks so much.
On the third episode of Accurate Hunts.
So I'm here with Ron Keener. He's already up me a few times for saying his last name wrong, so he's keener than I am in the fox whistling side of things.
Going back to the two notes. Yeah, that really high pitch one, and then you can hear that. I go out whistling at night time and I get dive bombed by owls.
Swoop? Right. Never thought about that.
The scariest one I was swooped by an eagle.